Goo,
Yeah.
and the folks at home. Today, we are talking about Secret Invasion.
I'm glad that we got the sex with the Skrulls out of the way, because that was really something that I've been thinking about.
We'll be coming back to that.
Okay, we'll get back to it. Okay, good.
There'll be more on that.
I'll be spending most of this podcast talking about that.
We're talking about Secret Invasion, a Disney Plus television miniseries, and I think that essentially means it's just going to be a one-off, no second season, but who knows? That could change.
I hope so.
Was a spoiler alert there? Big market tease?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I actually think where this season leaves off, a second season would almost have to be better.
Well, I would say that if you had more to tell, you could have put it into this season, because they didn't do enough with the 6 episodes that they had.
I almost feel like they actually needed a couple more episodes. So I guess we're feeling differently about this. Goo, this is the 40th, 40. So maybe we can do an official hot dog scale for the MCU coming up, maybe in a month or so when we have nothing else to talk about. 40th entry into the MCU. This is the 8th series. There have been 32 movies. This is a TV 14 action, adventure, and drama. I would sub out adventure and sub in thriller. More of a thriller and drama than anything.
Erotic. I'd put erotic in there.
Well, considering what we're talking about, yes. 6 episodes running a total of 269 minutes. Nice. That's approximately about 45 minutes each, although I think all 3 of the final episodes were under 40 minutes. And it did feel a little quick towards the end. The first 3 felt longer. The last 3 felt shorter. Goo. Yes. Really interesting discussion here about amongst what the critics and the audience feels about this show. On Rotten Tomatoes, this has a 57% from the critics, 60% from the audience. Now, that audience score of 60% makes it second worst by a lot, although the bottom there is 32% She-Hulk Attorney at Law. If you go by the audience scores, Goo, this is the 7th best show, and the 6 above it are all
best or worst? Oh, 7th best show. I'm sorry, I thought I meant property.
Seventh best show.
Yeah. So second to worst.
Correct.
Okay.
And the 6 above it have only a 10-point percentage spread there, from 90% to 80%. Loki, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Miss Marvel in that order. The critics, Goo, give it a 63 on Metacritic. That makes it the worst MCU show, according to the critics. A little bit below Hawkeye at 66, which I don't quite understand that. The spread here on Metacritic, the top is 78, Miss Marvel, 77, WandaVision, 74, Loki, also Falcon and Winter Soldier, 69, Moon Knight, nice. She-Hulk, 67, Hawkeye, 66, this 63. So the critics have sort of lumped them all together, or almost 2 tiers, according to the critics. I actually feel more like the critics, or at least the way they're kind of ranking these shows, more than I do the audience.
Okay, and I know that one of the big issues with the audience is that this was called Secret Invasion, and it did not come close to the comic, or it did not pay off on a lot of the stuff that the comic has in it.
So, a few days ago, Wes of Change My Mind podcast and I did a little bit of a series finale preview, and we talked a little bit about that. And I fucking hate these people. If you're one of those persons or folks that say the comic books did this and we never got there, the comic books are out the window at this point. We're certainly drawing upon them and taking ideas, but everything that happens in the MCU now has to be within context of the other 39, now other 40.
Well, I would say just call the show Nick Fury and the Skrulls.
No, call it Secret Invasion.
No, have a nice sitcom title.
The dummies could be upset about it. That's fine. The dummies could be fucking.
There weren't enough Avengers, and I do agree with her on that. There were not enough Avengers. I agree with them.
Well, again, it's all within the context of the MCU. So yes, Secret Invasion in the comic books is a grander scale story. Within the MCU, they purposefully made it a Nick Fury story. And that was clear months ago, years ago, 2 years ago when they shot this, that was clear. So that's just an absolute bullshit criticism. Now, if you want to argue what was in the show wasn't interesting, fine.
Well, that's my argument. But
it was never going to be what the comic book was. It's null and void. I don't think that's an appropriate criticism of the show. That's just, it's dumb. But again, I thought this show baseline was, it's hard to say a high floor, but that's sort of what I'm getting at here. The acting is so good in this show that I enjoyed every episode. Now, the finale wasn't particularly good. I thought the setup was pretty good. But I thought because of the acting, like there was almost no way the show was going to fail.
Yeah, I mean, I like Sam Jackson enough. I love his Nick Fury enough that I was never going to hate this show.
Yeah. And
but having said that, I was pretty bored.
All that said, Goo, though,
yeah,
we haven't hated any of the MCU shows.
I mean, the closest to hating, I would say, would be Moon Knight, just for the lack of connectivity, lack of connective tissue to the rest of the world.
I thought Falcon and Winter Soldier was the closest
I was
we got.
just about to get there.
Yeah, it took you too long.
And then also Captain America boys, although very captivating in the first 4 episodes, the last 2 episodes were terrible.
Yeah, the left turn that series took really bothered the shit out of me, more so than the finale does here. Also because the finale here sets up some potential things, and there are some possibilities in there.
And then also in Moon Knight, so if we're just looking at these 3, because these are my bottom 3 shows here in the MCU, I would just say that Moon Knight has the best single episode out of the 3 shows, but has the lowest floor, and it's a real mixed bag. This one probably is the most consistent out of those 3.
I think I have this 5th out of the 8.
Okay.
Smack dab in the middle. And
I mean, I have it, somewhere from 6 to 8, so we're not that far off.
Yeah, and I think the top 2 are head and shoulders above the rest.
Yes, agreed.
The next 2 are head and shoulders above this for me.
Granted, your second and my second are different, but I do agree that 2 are better than
But we have it
ones.
tiered similarly.
Yes.
Which is what I'm getting at here. Like the Metacritic scores all being within 15 points of each other is more so what I'm feeling than the audience being so far away on this one and She-Hulk. It's just, and we've talked about this a little bit. I think you have more MCU fatigue than I do. And I think that's starting to show and might show here in this conversation. I'm still generally liking most of this. I just am also expecting a bigger, like if we get a big payoff at the end of this phase, I'll be perfectly happy with this show.
And I've lowered my expectations. I've already told you that. With Ant-Man, heading into Ant-Man, I'm like, I'm expecting something a lot lower than what we've been getting, and we did. But I accept it. I'm fine with all of this right now. I am, like you said, though, I'm waiting for something big to happen.
Yep. And I think the end of the show has a bit of a to be continued on it as well. This show is created and written by Kyle Bradstreet. The only thing you'd really know him from was Mr. Robot. He was a producer and writer on Mr. Robot, which a lot of people really enjoyed. I sort of dipped out early in season 2. Because I hate what's his face there, Rami Malek.
Rami Malek, friend of the show.
He's got something upcoming called Alice. Alice Isn't Dead. So if you like this series a lot, maybe check that out. This show is directed and executive produced by Ali Salim. He or she, I didn't check what the gender was. Maybe they has done a lot of recent television directing as well as some writing, but you wouldn't know them from really anything at all. They're relative unknown. Synopsis: Fury and Talos try to stop the Skrulls who have infiltrated the highest spheres of the Marvel universe. It's a little overselling what takes
That's
place
a
here.
huge oversell.
Yeah, Earth is a substitute for Marvel universe there.
Yeah, I would say that's a big oversell.
Highest spheres of the Earth.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot of the show is way more low stakes than what we were expecting. And maybe it's an expectations thing again. Who knows?
But I also feel like what this whole show is centered around and that DNA machine and whatnot, that could get to the highest level of the Marvel universe. So there's a little bit of almost like a tease in that synopsis. This show stars Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, Emilia Clarke as Gaia, that's Talos' daughter, Don Cheadle here as Rhodey. They have him credited as Rhodey, which I think is bizarre. Kingsley Ben-Adir as Gravik. He's the main villain. Killian Scott as Pagan. He's Gravik's right-hand man. Ben Mendelsohn as Talos. Olivia Colman. Say that?
I said Mendy.
Olivia Colman as Sonya Falsworth. Charlene Woodard as Priscilla/Vara. That's Fury's wife. Dermot Mulroney as President Ritson. Christopher McDonald. That's right. Shooter McGavin in here is Chris Stearns.
Pew, pew, pew.
I really enjoyed the News Network parody stuff. That was well done. Colby Smulders is in here briefly as Maria Hill, as is Martin Freeman as Agent Evan Ross. And then we also have Nisha Aaliyah as Rava, who we'll talk about when we get into spoilers. To me, this show was a pretty solid setup the whole way through, 5 episodes through. And Wes and I talked about that a bit a few days ago. However, a pretty anticlimactic finale for me.
Yeah.
It just felt a little lame, a little neat, a little too neat.
Well, it has the same issue that a lot of the other MCU shows have of like, you have this different type of show. Like this was at least different than what we've seen in the other MCU shows, but we get in the final episode the same Z finish of not the greatest CGI. I'm not blaming the animators. It's just what the budget for the show is.
Better than
some of the other ones. Yes.
Yeah.
But you get this battle in the sky, you get the lights and the flashes and everything else, which it's just stuff that we've seen before.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk about that again in spoilers. I think they thought that was going to be cooler than it actually was, but there were
in
some cool
concept
moments.
Sounds pretty cool.
Yes, for sure. I'm sure when it was storyboarded, it looked awesome. All that negativity about the finale, though. However, they have sort of left some interesting possibilities on the table here, Goo, and like several threads there that I want to tug on. And I'm like, oh, this could lead to this, or this could lead to that. So they sort of did a good job I don't want to compare it to this. Maybe you will. What is the name of this? Dark World. How Dark World wasn't great, but it ended up being meaningful. I think down the line, the show's going to be
if this
meaningful.
Sets up Secret Wars, like if this is just a stepping stone so that when you get into Secret Wars, you don't need all this like backstory and everything else, we can just jump right into it, I guess then it's worth it.
I'm thinking other stuff, but again, we'll wait for spoilers for that. Also, again, the acting was fantastic in here. To me, there was good enough intrigue throughout the first 5 episodes to keep you invested, keep you looking forward to the finale. It just didn't deliver in that finale. But again, it might do that going forward. Also, no post-credit at the end of this series I found very frustrating.
Especially with the next property coming up directly linked to this.
Somewhat linked.
I mean, Nick Fury and Skrulls are in the movie. It's pretty linked.
I don't know if there's going to be much about Skrulls, but yes, they're probably.
Look at the trailers. There's a lot of Skrulls in there.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that Skrulls are a part of it.
Yeah,
and maybe a character from this should be a part of it because of what she can do now.
You're right. Again, possibilities.
Is that a saying? Is that a jingle somewhere?
Yeah, I'm going to have you pull that from the board. We'll get to it at the bottom here. Maybe you'll pick up on it.
Possibilities.
Yeah, it is. I'm telling you. Well, wait 10 minutes or 5, whatever we get there. Let's get to the gauntlet.
Okay, the gauntlet here, Mac. First one up here is fun factor. And I think there's not enough. I think there's 2 or 3 moments in here where I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. But then immediately felt bored right after.
I think that's a fair criticism. I criticized you for doing this on your short-lived podcast with Wes. I actually had fun looking up stuff.
Say my name.
Heisenberg, which you
say the name of my podcast.
Which was, I don't even remember what it was called.
MCU at Home. Well, that was like the general one, and then we flipped it every single time.
Yeah,
what was the name of my Loki podcast?
I don't remember.
Get Help.
Okay, yeah.
What was the name of my WandaVision podcast?
I don't know. One of them was really long. I remember that.
That was on purpose. Oh, it was what if we talked about Marvel's What If? Would you listen?
That's the one.
And the answer was for most people was no.
I really did have fun looking up stuff that about the episode after the episode. I found myself watching all the new Rockstar videos the moment they came out.
Yeah.
And this is oddly the first series of the 8 that has made me do that. A little bit though, because I got confused in some of the episodes.
Whereas for me, like you mentioned, I had that really successful podcast and I was doing that after every single one. And it just felt like homework after a while. And that's what this felt like.
It didn't feel like homework for me because it did fill in some gaps, so it felt necessary.
Okay. Well, I'm over looking up stuff immediately after episodes. Max, the next one up here is Satisfactor. How satisfied were you by the show? And much like you mentioned, anticlimactic ending did not help. There's 2 or 3 things in here that, yes, you do want answers for still, so that kind of leaves some intrigue, but not super satisfying.
Yeah, a pretty unsatisfying conclusion. Ultimately, that's what you're probably sort of what this means going forward from the 6 episodes itself. I think a lot of people will get to remember the unsatisfying conclusion.
I really want to say the thing that it was very satisfying for me, but I'm going to hold it off for the anti-spoilers. No, that's not the word.
No, the
Spoiler
actual
section.
spoilers.
The actual spoil. We're in the anti-spoilers
This
now. Borometer, very, very boring.
I don't agree about very, but again, I'm not going to argue. There was a lot of talky and not a lot of punchy the first half of the series. I can't say I was bored, but those first 2-3 episodes certainly could have used more action. But there was also some very intriguing dialogue in there. The problem is you just had to pay attention.
That intriguing dialogue needed better payoff to it.
I guess ultimately, but this wasn't a great show for like checking your phone, because if you missed a minute of dialogue, it actually meant something.
I have so many games on my phone.
Obviously, a jousting game.
Halloween. Will this show wane over time for you? I guess just needing to go back and check on some Easter eggs for future stuff. Otherwise, I don't need it.
Yeah, like rewatchability is not high here. However, I think we may be, now this isn't a guaranteed, we may be looking back at this series for massive ramifications going forward.
Question for you. And think about it very, very shortly, maybe milliseconds.
Okay.
Rewatchability, is this the lowest in the MCU so far? It might be, right?
Maybe. It's in the discussion for sure.
Top 5 at least.
Well, yeah, there's only 8 shows, so.
Well, I'm saying the entire MCU.
Oh no, I think it's above the
Eternals.
bottom 5.
I think it's around top 5 though. For rewatchability, not even intrigue while watching the show.
I'll have to look. I'll look at a bit.
I said you get 1 millisecond. Give me a yes or no answer. Would you eat the moon if it was made of barbecue spare ribs?
I already told you no.
All right, whatever. Aquator.
Again, I think they did a good enough job probably making this show matter going forward.
Aquator, better or worse than 2017's Aquaman? On the line? Above the line?
The quality
I'm below the line, I think.
The quality of acting in here, like, undoubtedly puts it well above. It does,
but Aquaman is more fun. Redheads, am I right?
This is above the equator.
Max Credit Union, who are you tossing credit at? Because you know who I thought was actually pretty good, and I haven't been the biggest fan of her in the past, is Emilia Clarke.
Oh, so you didn't love her in Thrones? I thought everyone liked her in Thrones.
I liked her in Thrones. You didn't like her in Terminator?
I did not watch that.
No, that wasn't very good.
Yeah, good enough. I thought Emilia Clarke and Olivia Colman were obviously great, but we expected them to be great. That's why they got cast in here in the first place. I absolutely loved Kingsley Ben-Adir, who I had never seen prior to this, and oddly enough, he was in Barbie, which just came out recently, so good month for him. I just never seen him before, and I thought he was as good as anyone in this show. So
yeah, and I thought, like, especially leading up to the final episode, I thought he was solid. I thought he was really good, especially in his little monologue at the end. I thought that was a very good job by him.
I thought he was like legit scary as a villain. He was a very good villain. One of the better villains we've seen recently.
Pants 10 City. Excite Bike Mania. What got you going from this show?
The possibilities going forward, Gil. Bit of a cop-out, but Campbell's chicken noodle possibilities.
What a payoff.
Pull it.
What a payoff.
Put it on the board. Put it on the board.
That'll do it for us, guys.
Please flip the cassette over to side B to continue the adventure.
I did not see that coming. And it's in the notes.
It's right there.
It's in the notes, and I still didn't see it coming. I don't know how to read that.
This show was devoid of a pants tent unless you love the final battle all that much. Really just the final battle was a possible pants tent. But the pants tent is going to be hopefully a payoff for what this show was fighting over. What everyone wanted is going to be the real pants tent here.
Before we get to the hot dogs, let me ask you about the AI theme song opening credits thing. Did that upset you?
I could care less about that.
I watched it once. I said I like the songs and the imagery is kind of cool. And then I skipped the intro after that.
I skip every time for every show. Like even Peacemaker, which everyone loved, I skipped after the first one. I don't have time for that.
You don't have time for theme
No,
songs.
not enough time in the day.
All right. Well, for those of you tardy to the Mac and Goo party, we rate everything on a 40 hot dog rating system. And Mac, I'm not sure how much I enjoyed this show. I think you could have tightened it up a little bit and maybe had, and this is something that Disney needs to look at in general, or Marvel needs to look at in general. I know that they're trying to, consolidate their stuff and not just put out a bunch of shows or a bunch of movies in a year, but like, is it worth it maybe doing made for TV specials, like having this as like a 2.5 hour, 2 hour made for TV special where then you're filling in to get to these movies? Because I'm not sure we needed 3 hours of this.
Yeah, I actually almost am on the opposite end of the spectrum there. I felt like there should have been more meat on the bone in here, and it felt like there probably was at one point. And again, they shot this 2 years ago. So it obviously went through some rewrites and some reshoots. So it almost feels like there was more to be done there, especially at the end, and they chopped it off.
Oh, you mentioned 2 years ago. I also feel like I would have liked this more if it came out 2 years ago. I think it would have been...
That's a you issue, though.
It would have been more connected to the stories that we were just with. This feels like it's so far apart from what we've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, but to your point, if you do think it's going to connect to the Marvels that much, then that's kind of null and void.
Nothing in here really felt new or fresh to me, and that is an issue with a lot of the MCU stuff right now. But if you can do it great, it's not as big of a deal. I don't think anything in here is done as well as, say, like a Guardians 3, where like that might not have been the freshest movie, but everything in it is done so well that you're still going to enjoy it. The acting's very good. I do like the acting. Like you said, I like Clark. I like Jackson. I like Ben Adair. And the story's solid enough, but not enough payoff. Like you get a little cliffhanger at the end of every episode, and even the payoff to all those cliffhangers aren't that good. Didn't really hold my attention as well as it should have. I'm looking around at 24 hot dog.
Ooh, harsh. So
harsh.
Is that the lowest score you've given to the 8 shows?
It is, but in retrospect, I should have given some lower scores on some other shows.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So you're going to have to go in at some point and reorder your MCU.
Don't tell me what to do.
Goo.
Yes.
Again, the finale to this, which secret invasion, espionage, thrilling stuff, was just way too neat. Not messy enough for something that was supposed to be kind of messy. And again, anticlimactic. They really hit you over the head with Nick Fury's love life, which, especially at the end, you're like,
but I thought that was interesting in like episode 3.
One of the best scenes in the whole series was when him and his wife were sitting at the kitchen table. Great scene.
Spoilers.
Awesome.
He's married.
It's not a spoiler. Again, it just...
I thought he was a freewheeling, swinging bachelor.
Too neat at the end. However, I do like this potential witch hunt direction they're going in. So that's a positive. That's one of the threads I'd like to pull on there. I'm very interested in a couple characters and what they're going to do going forward. Sonya Fallsworth and Gaia. I'm very intrigued by where they're going to lead us. I'm also very interested in this whole machine DNA technology stuff and where that plays out. Wes and I talked about this going into the finale here. Red Hulk possibilities, Fantastic Four possibilities. If you remember,
X-Men possibilities.
Fantastic Four get their powers when they're working on something and it explodes, right? So maybe they're working on a machine like this that explodes. That's how they get their powers. I thought it was a good show with great acting and a pretty lackluster finale. So it is an odd balance and it makes it hard to score. I got this like 31-32 hot dogs.
Oh.
29th overall in the MCU. Right in that Ultron Multiverse of Madness range. And I guess that's kind of fitting because all three had better promise and sort of didn't quite meet the bar we thought or had hoped, or expectations maybe were too high. And just below this is She-Hulk and Far From Home.
Okay, so if we're looking at shows, I would have that in the bottom 3. I would have this in the bottom 3 with Moon Knight and with Captain America, boys. I've already said Moon Knight, one great individual episode. Like one that if you just want to watch one episode of a Disney Plus show, go watch that. It's amazing. But then like Catboys was really captivating, like I said earlier. First 4 episodes, and then once Zemo left, a lot of the intrigue left. And then this show, it's consistent throughout, and it gives you these little nuggets, but then they just don't pay off on those nuggets. And also, everything that is meant to be a surprise in this show isn't.
Yes and no. There were a couple nice little like, oh, okay. But they also left the breadcrumbs out there for you to sort of figure it out.
Middle tier, Ms. Marvel and She-Hulk. I like those better than these shows. And then the top one, Loki doesn't get enough credit. Loki is such a good show. And we mentioned how like a lot of these shows have very similar finales. Obviously, She-Hulk is different. They went into a completely different direction. But the other ones are all like, let's have a big kicky, smashy party. And Loki is just discourse.
Yeah, Loki was the best payoff as well. I also really, really liked Borderline, loved Hawkeye. Those are my top 2.
I like Hawkeye. Hawkeye's my 3rd. I like WandaVision more. The first 8 episodes of WandaVision, actually, I'm sorry, episodes 3 through 8 of WandaVision are awesome to me.
I like the second half of WandaVision. You like the first half of WandaVision.
I like the middle. Don't say the second half.
Whatever. Yeah, to me, top 2, Loki, Hawkeye, middle 2, WandaVision and Ms. Marvel in its own tier. And then I think I have this clearly above the bottom 3, which would be She-Hulk, Moon Knight, and Falcon and Winter Soldier, but not that far above those top 2. Falcon and Winter Soldier, definitely 8th for me.
Shall we spoil?
Let's get to it.
Spoilers. And Mac, before you say anything, is Gaia too OP at this point?
She is. I almost feel like there's gonna have to be a taking away from, right? A reversal of some powers.
We're taking these back until we need to give them back to you to conclude a movie.
There's got to be something going on there.
And also,
she now has the powers of like 20 people.
But not only that she has the powers, but she knows how to use all of the powers, and she knows like what everyone's special abilities are. Whereas Benadir there really only knew to use the strong Avengers, the strong characters' powers.
Yeah.
Whereas she knew to tap into like Mantis being able to put someone to sleep.
Ghost.
Or Ghost, which I thought Ghost was actually a really cool part of it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, those aren't very well-known things. How much studying has she done? How does she know all of these abilities?
Yeah, it's clear. I think because she's been around the Avengers and those
I know, but
a little more. But it's clear that she was like smarter in that final
but
battle.
Also, say if she didn't know how to use the abilities of all of them, and like there were still more on the board that she could tap into later on, like those like specialty people, that would at least add like, well, how is she going to use Mantis in the future? Yeah. Whereas she used sleep powder early on. She used agility early on when most other people are just doing flamethrower.
Yeah, no,
that's a Pokemon reference for you people at home.
Goo, I'm going to quickly run through here what we learned during this series before the finale, and then we'll get into more finale stuff.
If you use poison early on, Mac, the other Pokemon, they'll, slowly lose HP.
I like sleep powder over poison powder.
I said sleep powder earlier. I didn't want to say sleep powder twice.
Fair enough.
Tell me another one. What's another one?
Paralyzed powder.
Oh, paralyze is good too.
Yeah, but sometimes they can still attack, which is absolute horse shit. So I never used it.
I like it when the other one is paralyzed with fear.
Yeah, there you go. Goo, Everett Ross was a Skrull. We find out in the first episode. And obviously at the end there, he gets released.
But we don't know. So his timeline, I'm very confused about. Like, I have no idea when he was taken in.
It had to have been post the first Black Panther.
Yes.
Because he gets shot in that.
Yeah.
And he didn't revert to Skrull. So sometime after Black Panther, and we don't know exactly when.
Because the other one, obviously, this is one that everyone's talking about all over the internet, is Don Cheadle's roadie, Chody, if you will. No, it's not Chody. It's Scrody. Sorry.
Scrody.
We call him Chody if we want, I suppose. But with him, because of the fact that he was still not able to walk after he gets out of his pod, or he doesn't have his, braces on his legs, whatever it is. Yeah.
He's still in a hospital gown.
Yes.
When he gets out of that pod.
Yes. And that is at the end of Civil War, which then makes you question, has this been a Skrull since Civil War? Which would make sense for some parts of Endgame and Infinity War, because We kind of mentioned this during our Endgame podcast, but he was very mean to Thor and Thor's weight gain. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. You're right about that. So him being in a hospital gown, you have to read into the fact that he became a Skrull shortly after Civil War. And that means, several things. And first of all, once Talos talks about how Fury got to where he got to in S.H.I.E.L.D. because of the Skrulls, you sort of have to think that someone we met in phase 1 and early on was probably a Skrull. So we find out Rhodey wasn't until after Civil War. I still think there's probably a big player out there that's a Skrull.
I certainly hope so, because if it's just him, that's kind of lazy, right? If it's just Rhodey, the one that we all thought was a Skrull.
I agree. But if Rhodey was swapped out post-Civil War, that means at the end of this series, he doesn't know about the blip, which means...
And about Tony.
He doesn't know that Tony Stark's dead.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a really interesting thing for that character going forward. It actually makes him a more compelling character.
You know what? That should have been the post-credit.
That would have been a pretty
that
good
would have been
yeah.
That might have saved it a little bit for me, because Don Cheadle, I know that we mock the character on this show a lot, but Don Cheadle's a great actor.
Yeah.
That would have been a great post-credit.
A chance for him to actually act and not just be a fucking lifeless idiot, which he mostly is through most of the MCU.
He was terrible in this. And I'm not saying...
I didn't think he was terrible in this.
No, I'm not saying him like acting in the show. I'm saying his character sucked.
He's a really bad guy.
Yeah. His character sucked.
Maria Hill gets killed here by Gravik in the first episode, I believe.
Actually, sorry. Question for back to Scrotal there. Scrody.
Yeah.
Do you think that... So if he, in fact, was a Skrull during Infinity War Endgame, that when he showed up to work the first day, Cheadle showed up to work, someone just went up to him and whispered, "By the way, you're a Skrull." And then he just looked around like, "Wait, what?" So he had to act a little bit different. Do you think he knew ahead of time he was a Skrull?
No way. No chance he knew until this series.
But he did act a little bit different.
Yeah, but also people can change,
People can change. I used to be a piece of shit.
It's true. You used to be a piece of shit. We find out the Skrulls are living in the abandoned Chernobyl area of Russia and have renamed it Skrullos, which I believe is the name of their home planet. A bit like a new Asgard type of situation.
Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing with Scrody. I saw a point.
We can still get to Scrody going forward.
I saw a point online, which makes complete sense too, is that at the beginning of Endgame, Scrody goes up to kill Thanos, and he sees this big open planet, wide, a very livable planet, and he never reports that back to the other Skrulls of like, we can take this planet.
Was Rhodey off Earth?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, right, when they went to go kill him. Okay, yeah.
Which is a good point. I think that's a pretty good point.
It would be hard to transport all of them there.
Just hop on his back. He's a war machine.
What I mentioned a little bit already, we learn in a pretty riveting conversation between Talos and Fury that there are now at least 1 million Skrulls living on Earth, and they all came post-blip, which coincided with Fury being off Earth. So that's interesting. And again, at the end of this finale, we see that basement with Falsworth and Gaia with it has to be thousands of humans that have been replaced by Skrulls. And that's the thing I was talking about that felt like there was a little more to that final scene that they just didn't show us, and they just cut it off, and there's no post-credit there. So that's going to mean something going forward.
But they started this pre-blip. It's just that they went harder post-blip, correct? Like
maybe there was hundreds pre-blip, something like that, maybe 1,000. But they obviously took over Earth when there was almost no humans.
I almost wish that they started this like 2000. Like they were here for 5 years and they were like, you know what? Fury's not getting this done. Let's start our revolt. And then they saw Shrek and they're like, now is our time.
Gravik becoming the leader of the Skrulls, that whole thing, that was decent. I was pretty intrigued by Falsworth throughout this whole series because you could tell she was obviously working against Gravik, but she wasn't exactly aligned with Fury. And now, after the series finale, she's definitely not aligned with Fury. She's aligned with Gaia, and it seems like she's probably going to have something to do with Valentina Consuelo, right? There's probably going to be.
I think it's a different team. No, there's so many different teams. in Secret Wars, maybe the big secret is no one knows what team they're on anymore.
But that's
there's
honestly,
so many teams.
At this point, that's how it should be. It shouldn't be just one massive superhero team. There should be factions of superheroes sort of allied, but maybe going against each other throughout the world.
So it's kind of like Invincible, where there's, just so many different teams of like A squads, B squads, C squads.
Yeah, a little bit like that, because we're so deep in at this point. And obviously, with Valentina Consuelo and the Thunderbolts coming up, and now with Fallsworth and Gaia in possession of that machine and that technology, I think it could mean that's how we get Red Hulk. Or again, this is a little further down the line. I think the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. I think this is how they introduced the Fantastic Fours with this machine.
But also, so she's almost like Superman, to the point of, do you need a team around her? Because she has all the powers. Like Captain Marvel doesn't even really need a team around her. She could pretty much, if Thanos didn't have the Power Stone there, she would have taken Thanos out by herself.
Again, I'm not too worried about Gaia going forward. She obviously is very overpowered at the moment, but I feel like something's going to happen there. I'm not spending too much brain power.
Gaia, where did all your powers go? I took a really big shit after that, and a lot of them just left my body.
There were a couple cool moments during the season when we first saw Extremis and Gravik using some of the powers of Groot.
Okay, so thank you for bringing that back up. That was the first time where I'm like, oh, that's very cool. When he used the Groot arm.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's see where this goes.
Right. And then he murks his right-hand man with the Groot arm. It was a cool moment seeing that Gaia up until the finale. No one knew besides her that she was a super Skrull. So she was saving that. And the whole Too Fury thing in the finale was a nice little, like,
Too fast, Too Fury, correct.
Sort of saw it coming, but that was a nice little thing. The other thing I'm wondering here, and this is a little complicated by my Fantastic Four theory. Why would Gravik set that machine off with Fury within it as well? Is it because do you think that they've run tests before and humans couldn't withstand taking on those powers, so he wasn't worried about that?
There's a lot of radiation in it. He was trying to, give him a nice slow death.
So it might take someone as strong as a Skrull, I guess, to sort of take on these powers.
They're not affected by radiation, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. And maybe being outside of that machine, maybe when it explodes, is how you could possibly get a power. But there's something a little bizarre about that, why Gravik just wouldn't leave Fury out of the way to take on those things. Not a bad final fight scene. Some cool moments in there between Gaia and Gravik.
I thought the ghost part was cool.
Yeah, I liked it. Was just all mostly arm stuff. I did like
it looked like Morty. It looked like Morty when he had the one really strong arm. It's also
I like the Ebony Maw moment. That was pretty cool.
That was cool. But when she had the Drax arm, I was like, that looks really fucking stupid.
Yeah, the scale was a little bizarre.
Yes,
for sure.
It was.
I thought Talos' sacrifice to save the president was great. It was a cool moment for Talos, who has sort of lacked that since we've seen him this whole runtime. And it does show at some point they'll be able to say, hey, these Skrulls actually helped save the president's life, who the president is now out for blood for all of these.
Yeah, so with him out for blood for all non-Earth creatures, species, I'm trying to think of what the word
it's a witch hunt for aliens.
Is he going to send the Asgardians back?
It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays into it.
Because he signed a treaty and is at the bottom of, I think, Wakanda Forever, saying that the Asgardians have, land here or something.
Yeah.
I can't think of the.
But I don't think they're in America, are they?
No, they're
in like Greenland or
Greenland, I think, Iceland, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere over there.
So Iceland is green and Greenland is ice.
That doesn't matter a ton.
The fact that I just told you, that matters a lot.
This whole harvest situation is also pretty interesting because they just have this one vial with like 30 people's DNAs in it.
Which, by the way, whenever they said collecting DNAs, unless I giggled. I giggled every single time. I'm a child.
I've seen some people online raise the fact that some of those people weren't in the final.
Ghost wasn't.
Earth. Yeah. But obviously they've been collecting samples for longer.
Over time, they've been building it up.
That's an easy thing to explain away.
But I just also imagine like Fury's in there. He's like, all right, you're in the Avengers. Jerk off into this cup.
Why? No reason.
They're like, oh, I just did a couple minutes ago. All right, well, like in a couple hours, can you jerk off again in this cup?
Yeah. That witch hunt stuff I think is kind of cool going forward, though. Like that's going to be a little bit of a wild card. And as we already saw, the British Prime Minister comes back. She gets shot, had already replaced herself. She ends up getting killed for real.
Fury, how was your day? The Hulk jerked off into this cup. It's fucking huge load. Oh, then what happened? Oh, Iron Man, he jerked off into this cup. I collected jerk offs all day.
Yeah,
that's what I did.
What do you think they did for Black Widow?
Just jerked off into this cup. I made a hand motion like this below the screen.
Goo, one of the final moments or the final
hair.
Fury's
hair. DNA. It's
Fury's
hair.
final moment on screen.
Fur is hair.
During the series is him and Vara and a nice makeout sesh before they go back up to Saber. And this was just a little too much.
I sent you the photo and I said, what in the world is this?
It was
Which then much. That's what made me question. I'm like, okay, so clearly they have fornicated.
Sure.
When she was a lady.
They've consummated the
marriage.
It
just makes you think of, which I feel like he's always had a thing of like, if she's green, I'd probably still do it.
I do like
which there are some nights, where you are just in that mood where, look at you. You
couple 2-3 double IPAs and
I know.
Like green, blue, purple, it don't matter.
I'm gross, you're green. Let's go.
I do like that little tidbit, like how they came back together, because I thought this woman was a very good actress. I don't know if she'll be playing the Skrull going forward, Vara. But a nice little moment that he accepts her for who she is. She accepts him for who he is. It's just, we didn't really need it at the end, especially the tongue sesh, but
it was
got it.
So like, it wasn't for me, but I could see someone watching this show and being like, you know what? This has kind of jumped the shark. Right? That's a shark jumping moment, correct?
I don't know if it's quite that, but yeah, I could see people getting pretty perturbed with it. Goo, you had to figure Gaia was going to remain in the MCU going forward. Otherwise, they wouldn't cast such a famous actress.
Yeah, correct.
I'm still a little disappointed that Gravik's not in play going forward. I thought he was genuinely great and a really good villain.
Yeah, he was good. But he always felt like a one-off.
Yeah, he did. So it's more wishful thinking than anything. I just wish some of the villains I wish we have more of going forward, and that most of them end up being one-offs.
Anything else on Rhodey? You want to talk about Rhodey?
Again, that is a pretty interesting thing going forward, and I think they still have Armor Wars on the horizon at some point.
I don't know, because they've already said that we're going to cut back on some of these shows.
Sure.
Armor Wars feels like an easy casualty.
Yeah, probably. But his next appearance is going to be pretty interesting because he's going to take in all these. So if he was taken post-Civil War in the MCU time-wise, it's been 8 or 9 years that a Skrull has been Rhodey. It's a really fucking long time.
I know, but I still need one bigger player to also.
I agree with you. I think we need another Phase 1 character that isn't Rhodey, and he wasn't even taken over in Phase 1.
It needs to be a human. It can't be another alien, because that's.
Sure.
Oh, you mean this alien was also another alien?
Like Pepper Potts, for example.
Pepper Potts, like that'd be too much in Stark's crew, though. Like, don't you need someone else in a different crew?
I was going to say maybe Happy Hogan is a Skrull.
That's another person in the same crew.
I know, but it was a heavy Tony Stark crew the whole time.
Like, what if you find out that
he was in the back?
What if you find out that Flash Thompson was a Skrull?
I don't think they're replacing 16-year-old kids.
What if you find out that not Neil, I think Neil's his real name. What's his name there? Peter's friend. I'm blanking on his name right now.
Oh, yeah. I forget his name.
Zendaya. What if Zendaya was a Skrull?
Zendaya. Like, it's pronounced Zendaya.
What if we find out that every lady in the MCU is a Skrull, and they've all just been doing this?
Again, Goo.
Yeah.
My biggest hope from this show going forward is it creates the Fantastic Four or something like that. Otherwise, I don't know why you would spend so much time on this DNA stuff if you weren't going to use it to the good guys' benefit at some point.
Also, I just want to just one person be like, oh, how did you get that DNA? He's like, well, I got it from the battlefield. How did you really get that DNA?
So you wanted the post credit of Fury collecting jizz cups.
No, just someone like him admitting like what he like that'd be so. I either want the really serious roadie ending of him finding out that he's been gone for so long, that Tony has died, that a lot of his world is gone, or them talking about semen. One of the two.
I think the Avengers towers and base probably had some sort of thing where you couldn't enter it unless it had your DNA and detected your DNA. So maybe that's how they got it.
Put your cock in this.
Stick your dick in this hole, please.
You got anything else from this show?
No, that's it. It was a good, not great show with a lackluster finale. That's my takeaway.
And once again, I thought it was really cool because don't take away that Goo's a negative Nancy. I thought it was cool when he had the Groot arm.
Groot arm was great. Agreed.
And it would have been great if you said, I wonder how this feels.
They actually, Extremis was used better like 4 times here than they ever used it in Iron Man 3.
All righty then. So 20, what did I say? 24?
You said 24.
Yeah, sure.
32 for me. Why not?
Oh, hi. It's Goo from the Mac and Goo Movie Club. If you like what you just saw, you can find full episodes of our program on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, CastBox, iHeartRadio, or wherever podcasts are found. And now it's time for girls jumping on trampolines.